The email notification pinged while I was meticulously arranging barrettes for tomorrow's grade 11 titration practical. Subject: our mutually agreed path forward. My heart did a weird lurch, a sudden, unexpected exothermic reaction in the quiet of the empty chem lab. 16 years of marriage apparently could be neatly summarized in a 2-page PDF attachment. My name is Arthur Miller, art to most, 44 years old, a high school chemistry teacher in suburban Ohio. Linda, my wife, had evidently decided our shared path had reached its endpoint. The email was concise. She'd moved out. She'd engaged a lawyer. She suggested we handle this amicably and efficiently. I read it twice. The words swam. I closed the laptop, mechanically finished labeling the Regent bottles, and packed my bag. The drive home was a blur. The house echoed with a new kind of silence. No note on the counter. Just the digital chill of that email. The next day I lectured on chemical bonds while my own were dissolving. That night, staring at the ceiling, I knew. This wasn't an impulsive decision on her part. This was a calculated move, and I needed to understand every single us variable. A truth is, the signs had been there for a while, subtle shifts in our domestic atmosphere. About a year ago, Linda, who managed grants for a local arts nonprofit, became obsessed with personal growth seminars. Weekend workshops, new, lightened, friends I never got to meet, hushed, earnest phone calls in the other room. She, who once loved our Saturday mornings, tending our vegetable garden, started calling it stiflingly domestic. Her excuses for missing our quiet evenings grew more frequent. I wasn't naive. I started making my own quiet preparations. I systematically scanned and uploaded all our important documents, mortgage papers, my modest retirement fund statements, car titles to a secure cloud server, the password of mnemonic based on the periodic table. I also opened a separate account at a small credit union downtown, diverting a small, almost unnoticeable portion of my paycheck each month. My research fund. I'd grimly joked to myself. It wasn't much, but it wouldn't be starting from absolute zero if the bottom fell out. My gut, hunned by years of observing slow reactions, told me we were undergoing a Lurse phase transition. I met Linda at a pub trivia night. I was with a couple of teacher friends. She was with her book club. Her laugh cut through the bar noise, genuine and bright. I was 28, she was 27. We talked for hours that night about everything and nothing. She found my passion for chemistry endearing, not nerdy. We were married 15 months later, a simple ceremony in her parents' backyard. The early years were good, really good. We'd spend hours hiking in the Cuyahoga Valley, debating movies, planning our future. Our happiest moment? Probably the weekend we rented a tiny cabin by Lake Erie. No TV, no phones, just a crackling fire, and her curled up beside me as I pointed out constellations. She said I made the stars make sense. Our backgrounds were different. I was the son of a stoic engineer and a pragmatic school librarian. Logic and order were my inheritance. Linda's parents owned a quirky antique shop. She was raised on art, intuition, and a belief in following your heart. We bought our little Cape Cod-style house using my small inheritance from my grandfather and her savings. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. We painted it, planted a maple tree, argued over wallpaper. It was our shared experiment in domesticity. My dad's sudden passing from a heart attack 5 years into our marriage hit me hard, and Linda was my rock. She held me together. For a while. But slowly, things began to change, like a solution becoming cloudy before a precipitate forms. Linda started saying my job was too predictable, that I was settling. "Don't you want more from life, Art?" she'd ask. More meant expensive trips we couldn't afford, a lifestyle I didn't particularly crave. My attempts to explain our budget, using analogies from balancing chemical equations, only made her call me rigid. Her weekend retreats became longer, more frequent. She'd talk about her mentor, a guy named Julian, who apparently got her in ways I no longer did. Conversations dwindled to logistics, bills, groceries. Who was picking up the dry cleaning? The decisive moment, the point of no return, was last Thanksgiving. My sister and her family were over. Linda was polite but distant, a ghost at her own table, constantly checking her phone. Later that night, she said, "I just don't feel connected to this art, to any of it." The chill in her voice was absolute. She thought I was just a quiet, unassuming chemistry teacher, easily dismissed. She underestimated the patience of an observer, the precision of a mind trained to see the full reaction, even when it's slow and insidious. This experiment wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a lull between my last class and the upcoming chemistry club meeting. The email from Linda still echoed, a dissonant frequency in the usually ordered lab of my mind. I needed more data. I couldn't just sit with that one variable, her curt dismissal. On a hunch, I pulled up our joint savings account on my school laptop, the one we'd painstakingly fed for over a decade, our someday fund for a trip to see the northern lights, or maybe a small cottage by a lake. The balance glared back 317 and 2. My breath hitched. Just last month I'd checked, it was over 45,000. I clicked on transaction history. Withdrawal after withdrawal. Small at first, a few hundred here and there, then larger chunks, $5 under $10 and another 10,000. The dates corresponded with Linda's recent, intensive self-discovery weekends, with that Julian character. The final, largest transfer, almost a 20,000, was to an account number I didn't recognize, dated just 3 days before her email. My hands felt cold. It wasn't just leaving, it was a systematic emptying. A stoichiometry of betrayal calculated to leave me with nothing. I stared at the screen, the gentle hum of the fume hood the only sound. She'd planned this, meticulously. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, or worse, a failed titration where everything went irreversibly wrong. Mr. Henderson, our veteran physics teacher, found me in the faculty lounge staring blankly at a Bunsen burner diagram. He's a good guy, pragmatic, seen it all. Art, he said, his voice kind but direct, you look like you've lost your favorite catalyst. I managed a weak smile. I don't usually air my dirty laundry, but the numbers on that bank statement were screaming. Linda's left Harry, I said, the words tasting like ash. And she's cleaned out our savings. All of it. He didn't offer platitudes, just a slow nod. All right, that's a significant force vector in the wrong direction, he said, ever the physicist. First things first, secure anything that's solely yours. Any personal accounts, credit cards in your name only, and you need to talk to a lawyer. Yesterday, his advice was practical, a grounding rod in the electrical storm brewing inside me. He was right. This wasn't just an emotional crisis, it was a logistical one. That night's sleep was a foreign concept. My mind raced, replaying Linda's recent detached behavior, her vague answers, her sudden obsession with financial independence workshops, led by Julian. Then a thought sparked. Our smart home system. I'd installed a couple of security cameras a few years back after a minor break-in down the street, one covering the front door, another in the kitchen. Linda probably forgot I had remote access through an app on my phone. My fingers fumbled as I logged in. The front door camera feed loaded. Julian Vance's sleek, slightly too flashy sedan was parked in my driveway. I watched, a knot tightening in my gut, as he sauntered out of my house, carrying a grocery bag, whistling. He looked comfortable, at home. Then I switched to the kitchen cam. There was Linda laughing, leaning against the counter I'd meticulously tiled myself. And there was Julian, wearing my old college sweatshirt, the faded blue one with the Avogadro's number joke that only chem nerds found funny. He was drinking from my favorite mug, the one my students gave me. He picked up what looked like real estate brochures from the table, Linda pointing at something on them. The casual intimacy, the brazenness of it, was a physical blow. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an invasion. I saved the footage, every damning clip, meticulously timestamping them, uploading them to my secure cloud server. Each click was a nail in the coffin of what we once had. Something inside me shifted then. The shock, the searing pain didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a cold, hard clarity. The kind of clarity I felt when a complex experiment finally yielded a predictable, understandable result. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about strategy. This was about consequences. My grief began to precipitate into a solid resolve. I pulled out a legal pad and started a list, my handwriting surprisingly steady. 1. Call Mark Jenkins, my old college roommate, now a sharp litigator in Columbus. 2. Check mortgage documents. I was almost certain the house was primarily secured by my inheritance, the loan in my name. 3. Secure personal credit union account, change passwords, add alerts. 4. Review recent paperwork. Linda had a stack of financial planning documents she'd asked me to sign off on a few weeks ago, claiming Julian advised it for tax efficiency. Had I been that blind? My focus narrowed. This was a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced. The pre-dawn quiet of my temporary, sterile apartment felt like a command center. I sent a short, encrypted email to Mark. Mark, need legal help. Urgent and extremely sensitive. Situation at home. His reply came back in under 30 minutes. A testament to our old bond and his work ethic. Art. Call me. Secure line. Now. I stepped out onto the tiny balcony, the city lights still twinkling below. The call was brief. I laid out the basics: the email, the empty accounts, Julian, the house. Mark listened, his questions precise, probing. Don't contact her, Art. Not a word. Don't change any joint access patterns yet. Let her think you're still in the dark about the full scope. We need to see how deep this reaction pathway goes. Document everything. Everything. When I hung up, the raw emotion was still there, but now it had a channel, a direction. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was preparing. 2 days later, after taking a personal day citing a sudden plumbing emergency, a lie that felt surprisingly easy, I was sitting opposite Mark in a nondescript diner miles from my school or home. Mark hadn't changed much since college, still lean and tense, with eyes that missed nothing. Art, he said, after I'd given him the grim details, complete with printouts of the bank statements and stills from the security cam. You look like you've been through a fractionalized distillation. This man. Stripped bare. He slid a folder across the table. Okay, here's the immediate plan. We send a formal request for all bank records, including the destination of that large transfer. We pull the property deeds and all mortgage documents. We need to establish a clear timeline and a paper trail. If she and this Julian character are as reckless as they are greedy, they've left footprints. His confidence was infectious. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of control, a sense of a control variable being introduced into a chaotic system. The first bombshell from Mark arrived a week later via a secure message. Art, you need to see this. Linda applied for, and was granted, a home equity line of credit, a halo key on your house 6 weeks ago. For $75,000, I felt the floor drop. What? I never signed anything for a halo. The house is primarily in my name because of my grandfather's inheritance covering most of it. Mark's reply was grim. Your signature is on the application. Art. Or a very convincing forgery. I've got a handwriting analyst looking at a sample you sent, but this one is close. However, the notary public listed on the document, her commission expired 3 months before the notarization date. That's a critical flaw. My mind reeled. Forgery. A fraudulent loan against our home. Where did the money go? I typed back, my fingers stiff. Mark sent another file. The halak was funded. A $30,000 wired to Vance Empowerment Group LLC, another $30,000 to an account in Julian Vance's personal name. Linda withdrew $15,000 in cash over 3 transactions. The sheer audacity. It was a coordinated, systematic plunder. Not a spur-of-the-moment betrayal, but a calculated financial assault. Mark's next update added another layer to the unfolding sleaze. My private investigator ran a background check on Julian Vance and his Vance Empowerment Group. It's a shell corporation, Art. Vance has a pattern. He targets women, often those recently divorced, widowed, or, like Linda, in a marriage he helps define as stifling. He sells them on empowerment and investment opportunities that are just fronts to siphon their assets. We've found 2 other similar cases in the state, one involving another teacher. It's a chain reaction of fraud. He isolates them, gains their trust, then bleeds them dry. Linda. She's either a willing accomplice or she's so far under his spell, she can't see she's being fleeced along with you. The lines are blurry right now. This wasn't just about my stolen savings or a broken heart anymore. This was a predatory scheme, and Linda was, at best, a deeply compromised player. My resolve hardened. This wasn't just about getting my life back, it was about stopping him. Okay. Art. Mark said on our next call, his voice firm. We have enough. First, we're formally notifying the bank that the halak was obtained fraudulently. They'll freeze the funds and start their own internal investigation. I've already spoken to their fraud department liaison. Second, I'm preparing a comprehensive criminal complaint for the county prosecutor's office, forgery, wire fraud, the works. We'll also file a lis pendens on the house immediately. That will effectively block any attempt to sell or transfer the property title while this is ongoing. I agreed to every step. Each action felt precise, deliberate. It was like setting up a complex chemical apparatus, ensuring every connection was secure before initiating the main reaction. No more passive observation. It was time to introduce a regent. A few days after Mark filed the official notices, my phone buzzed with a text. Linda. The first direct communication since her devastating email. Art, I just got a strange call from the bank about the HELI. They said there's a dispute and a hold on the account. And Julian's having some issues with his business account too. This must be some kind of mistake, right? Can you call them and clear it up? I stared at the message, her attempt at nonchalance almost comical. The mistake. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the text to Mark. The first ripple from our actions had reached her. The experiment was now live. The official wheels started grinding faster than I'd anticipated. Mark's criminal complaint, bolstered by the forged Hollock documents and the damning security footage, landed on the desk of a Detective Kyler Rourke in the county's Economic Crimes Unit. Rourke was all business, a man whose questions were as precise as a well-calibrated burret. He interviewed me for hours, meticulously going over every detail, every date, every withdrawal. He was particularly interested in the Vance Empowerment Group LLC and Julian's methods. Mr. Miller, he said, his gaze steady, your documentation is impeccable. It forms a strong initial reactant in this case. It wasn't just my local county. Rourke mentioned they were liaising with authorities in 2 other states where Julian Vance's name had popped up in similar empowerment schemes targeting vulnerable individuals. My isolated betrayal was clearly a repeating decimal in Julian's playbook. Mark and I, with Rourke's tacit approval, maintained a watching brief. The lis pendens was firmly in place, preventing any sale of the house. Linda predictably started calling, panicked, confused, then angry. What is going on? Julian says his accounts are frozen. The bank won't release the Hello funds. You have to fix this. I followed Mark's strict instructions, no contact. I simply forwarded her voicemails and texts to Rourke. The security cameras continued their silent vigil. We saw Julian visit the house several times, hushed, urgent conversations with Linda in the kitchen. Their body language screamed desperation. One evening, the camera caught Julian trying to systematically wipe a laptop, a new development. I immediately flagged it for Rourke. He just said, "Good. Let them dig their own hole deeper. We maintain chain of custody on all evidence you provide." It was like watching a slow, inevitable precipitation reaction. The critical moment wasn't a dramatic raid, but a quietly sprung trap. Rourke's team had been tracking Julian's financial movements, or lack thereof, given the frozen accounts. They learned Julian was attempting to liquidate some other, smaller assets through a less than reputable dealer in a neighboring county. One afternoon, Mark called. They've got him, Art. Rourke's team picked up Julian mid-transaction. They're bringing Linda in for questioning too. No sirens, no televised drama, just the efficient click of handcuffs. Later, Rourke described Julian's reaction: initial bluster, then a rapid deflation when confronted with the sheer volume of evidence, the forged signatures, the bank trails, statements from other potential victims they'd already quietly interviewed. Linda apparently crumbled almost immediately, claiming she'd been duped, manipulated, blinded by promises of a new life. The investigation peeled back layers of deceit like an onion. Julian Vance wasn't just a smooth-talking con artist. He was the architect of a multi-year, systematic fraud, preying on at least a dozen individuals across 3 states. The Vance Empowerment Group was a hollow shell, a money laundering front. He'd isolate his targets, build intense emotional dependency, then expertly drain their finances. Linda, it turned out, was both victim and accomplice, naive enough to believe Julian's lies about my supposed hidden assets and his investment genius, but also complicit in forging my name and actively helping drain our joint accounts and the HELA. The sheer scale of his operation was chilling. My case was just one data point in a much larger, uglier graph. The legal system for once moved with reasonable speed. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Julian Vance pled guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. He got a hefty prison sentence, 7 to 10 years. Linda, in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against Julian, managed to avoid criminal charges. She agreed to a divorce settlement that was, to put it mildly, unfavorable to her. Full restitution of her share of the pilfered funds, or what was left of it, forfeiture of any claim to the house, my pension, my everything. The divorce was finalized without me ever having to see her in court. A clean, if painful, titration of our shared life down to its endpoint. The house sold relatively quickly, even with the list pendants having cast a shadow. I couldn't live there anymore. Every room held a ghost of betrayal. I systematically went through our possessions. Photos of us smiling. From years ago, I kept a few from the very early days, the ones before the corrosion set in. The rest, her clothes, her books, the accumulated detritus of a shared life, I had professionally cleared. I packed my own essentials, my chemistry textbooks, my father's old toolkit, a few cherished mementos. I resigned from my teaching position at the end of the school year. Mr. Henderson shook my hand, his grip firm. "Art," he said, "sometimes a change in phase state is necessary for new compounds to form. Go find yours." His words, as always, resonated. I said my goodbyes to colleagues, a few close students. Then, I just drove away. I ended up in Port Clement, Washington, a small town nestled between forested hills and the rugged coastline. The air smelled of salt and pine. I bought a small, slightly run-down cottage overlooking the water with the proceeds from the Ohio house. It needed work, a lot of work. I found I was good with my hands, a different kind of precision than titrating solutions. I started doing freelance science curriculum development for online educational platforms, my chemistry knowledge finding a new solvent. I also tutored local high school kids struggling with chem and physics. My days found a new, quieter rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch watching the fishing boats. Afternoons writing or fixing up the cottage. Evenings with Pip, a scruffy terrier mix I'd adopted from the local shelter. His name a nod to the pipettes I used to handle daily. The equilibrium was slowly, steadily returning to my life. One afternoon, a forwarded email arrived from Mark. It was from a woman in Idaho. Her name was Sarah. She wrote that she'd been one of Julian Vance's earlier targets, losing a significant portion of her late husband's insurance payout before she got suspicious. The investigators on her case had eventually connected with Detective Rourke. They told me your careful record, keeping and refusal to just let it go were instrumental in building the larger case against Vance. She wrote, because you fought back, they were able to see the pattern and finally stop him. You helped prevent others from suffering what and you, went through. Thank you. I read it 3 times. It wasn't just about my money or my marriage anymore. My personal, painful distillation had somehow yielded something that helped others. A small, unexpected catalyst for a wider good. I don't think about Linda much anymore. The anger, the pain, they've faded, like old ink. There's just a quiet sense of an experiment concluded, the results noted, the lab cleaned up. I focus on the sound of the waves, the steady companionship of Pip, the satisfaction of a well-written lesson plan or a perfectly mitered corner on a bookshelf I'm building. Last I heard, Julian was still appealing his sentence from a federal penitentiary. Linda, Mark mentioned, had moved in with her sister, trying to piece her life back together. I wish her no ill. We all make our choices, our reactions. For me, life has become about appreciating the simple constants, the genuine connections, the quiet integrity of a day well spent. It's a different kind of chemistry, one based on peace, not turmoil.